AppSec, what to look out for in 2022. My name is John Whiteman. It's great to hear people who've been in the business for a long time here. So the idea of ageism is real out there, but yeah, I can honestly say, like a lot of folks in here, our experience spans 2 centuries. You can honestly say that, last century, this century. I'm a security researcher for Intel Corporation. I'm a part-time instructor at the University of Portland. I also finished a 6-month cohort teaching at UC Berkeley's Extension Cybersecurity Bootcamp. I want to give a shout out to OWASP PDX. This is an open source or nonprofit, it's open source, but they do a lot of open source work. Nonprofit, this is where I met Ushan and all these other folks. One ulterior motive I have here is that we need security people in the world. We don't have enough. And a long time, I was a QA person as well. I worked with Heather, for example, many years ago. And the biggest difference I saw in the work, you take a Venn diagram, they're almost identical in terms of responsibilities. We too are very paranoid. Even more so. The difference, I would say, is we have a stick. Where I didn't have as big of a stick. It's like the Roosevelt thing, right? Talk softly, carry a stick. We have a stick. And so if you're interested in security, whether to bolster your current career or you want to get into security, I recommend OWASP. There's probably a chapter in your area. There's one in PDX as well. And also certifications. I have a bunch of certifications. So sometimes people go that route to see if they like it. I also grow wasabi and a kombucha maker. And if you want to link up with me, that's my link account. Micro, by the way, I only have 1 plant. That was yesterday. Still growing. It's hard to grow wasabi in the Northwest. Disclaimers, I have to say that for an employee, my opinions, of course, are my own. And also, I'm not a doctor, but I do practice medicine in my basement. We'll just continue with that. So, what's new in 2022? Well, we're in the 3rd week in January already. Things are already repeating. And it's the same thing, and I hate to say it, I was hoping to make these great dynamic slides of some new things. Well, there are some new cool things, but we haven't really seen changes in AppSec security since at least 1999. I'll show you what I mean by that. So if Ushan invites me next year and the following year, I can just take the same slide. Oh, by the way, you've probably never seen this before, but this is a slide of this presentation in this presentation. I think that's pretty cool, about recursion or something there. But yeah, I could just keep going, and then 2030. Why do you think I picked the year 2030? Anybody? Any significance to that? And I don't expect anybody to know. This is my retirement. This is my goal, okay? And here's some great data to look at. Anybody heard of CVEs before? Right, most of you have. If not, they're called common vulnerability enumeration. And what they are is a public database or a public listing of security bugs, and anybody can file them. It's maintained by Homeland Security, NIST, in particular, an organization called MITRE. And they've been doing this since 1999. Well, you might have heard of some of these. Heartbleed, that was a pretty big one. Shell shock, that might have been something pretty big. And this is back in 2014. Apache Struts. Anybody have an Equifax account? Remember that one? That was a Java-based one. How about Apache Log4j? Anybody's heard of that one? We have people at work who had to give up their vacation in December because this thing was so bad. Anybody watch Spinal Tap? Remember that scene where they want to take that amp and make it to 11? Well, the highest severity that you can have in CVEs is 10. This thing was so bad, like a Spinal Tap kind of plot, they wanted to make 11. It was so bad. And it's happening. And in fact, if you notice here from 2017 on, you'll see this huge increase of these submissions. And in fact, what happened was, I was kind of curious about that myself, they streamlined the submission process. And so usually now when you look at the data, I don't think the original people that put this whole thing together were expecting to see something like 15 to 20,000 issues filed every year. But it's growing. And that's what I was talking about in the beginning. Nothing has changed. So I could take a classic classroom textbook type of thing and do some plotting. Linear regression, nice plot line, looking at the trend. Basically, from every year from now, what we have now, add another 1,262.2 bugs, and that's what you're going to get. Anybody know why I have the palm tree and the island in the water? That's right, that is my retirement. So this means job security for me. Job security, of course, the bigger picture is that's not a good thing, right? We should see it the other way. That's what I was talking about, things are the same. So somebody might ask, well, can we achieve perfect security? What's the point? It seems like we're losing this battle. In many ways, we are. There's a great quote by Gene Stafford, famous computer scientist. He worked on the early days like Morris Worm and all of this stuff. He said, the only truly secure system is one that is powered off, cast in a block of concrete, and sealed in a lead-lined room with armed guards. Does that sound like a secure system?
No.
No, why not?
Richard Feynman stole the secret of the atomic bomb because there was a copy.
Yeah, with the little notes and the safes and all of that, right? Yeah, I read that book. You're right. This is a bit of a hyperbole, but these are all possible attacks. We talked about powered off. Well, there's something called cold boot attacks, RAM. I could take a system, especially an older system, look at your RAM, throw some liquid nitrogen on there, some special tools, and maybe be able to get secrets off the RAM when the system is off. It's not easy, but you can do it. Concrete, what do you think we can do with concrete? Well, some people say brute force attack, blow it up, right? You can't. But you might have heard of supply chain attacks. I can just take and sabotage the mix itself, put some magic white powder in there, concrete turns to powder years later or something, right? I can sabotage it with that mix with impurities, or I can blow it up too. This one I had a problem with, lead-lined room. I said, that's pretty good. It's like a Faraday cage. You can't get any transmissions, electromagnetic stuff. That's always been an issue. Anybody think of anything that's bad with a lead-lined room? Well, one thing that always trumps security is safety, right? And your health, it's unhealthy. Long-term exposure to things like lead could cause amnesia, kidney problems. They're still using them as lead aprons for x-rays, but you don't wear a lead apron for a very long time. Safety first. Finally, what about the guards? This looks like a good guy. We can't trust on the technologies. What's the problem with the good guy here? The biggest threat to security is something called insider threats. People, carbon-based, always the case. I used to do this part-time when I went to school. I made $5 an hour. If there's something in that building there that's worth millions, they probably would maybe bribe the guy. And even if the guy's honorable, they may do something like threaten his family, or maybe he's just not a good guard, falling asleep. Insider threat is always a problem. Now I hear people talk about AI and machine learning, and it's promising, but it's not quite there yet. Coincidentally, when I was making the slide, within like 5 minutes, I went and looked at the news. Take a look at this. It's a news site that I go to, and it collects all the different news sources from anywhere and puts it together. The first 2 articles here talk about meat. In fact, it's an E. coli contamination, right? Pretty good. And then the third one down here, an article by good old Rob Adams talks about 4 great burger spots in Oregon. Now I know they're doing the right thing, the machine learning is doing it. Even if they're not doing machine learning or some sort of statistical thing like word distances, you still need a person here to say, that might not be quite right. You might want to take that out. Also, if you look at AI and machine learning and you say, well, what is the security? Do a Google of it. It's about IT security, not so much about application security. It's all about, because that's who's getting attacked the most. Now, granted, most of the time when they find these vulnerabilities is because it's a terrible application. It has some kind of vulnerability. Finally, if you do get some kind of software that might be interesting to you, it's too expensive these days. Just can't do it, especially for a small company. Great stuff coming, but a long way to go. I talked a little bit about supply chain attacks. SolarWinds, here's a good example where attackers can basically insert things outside of your environment. Many of your applications today, they're using third-party components. And even if, in things like modules and libraries and frameworks. But I work with teams that sometimes come back to me and they say, oh, we have our own code. We got to see, we're not using anybody else, no threat to us. And then I ask them, what compiler do you use? Where did you get that compiler? Did you build your own compiler? No. Go online, look at these attacks where people are downloading compilers that are not from a trusted source. What about this? Where do you hold your code at? GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket? There's attacks against them as well. And by the way, I put SolarWinds up there. If you haven't heard about it, read it. This is going to be 2022. These things called side channel attacks, which have been there forever, but it's kind of percolating to the top. This is the scariest one that I saw. Anybody heard of Trojan Source? I write code. Here's an example. Hopefully you can read it. It's pretty simple. I got editor 1 in there. This is Python. It has 2 functions. It says say hello. Now, mostly in code, like especially a language like Python, you can write the same function name all the way through. It's only the last one that it will take. You see at the bottom here, I call that function. So what do you think if I executed this? What will the output be in the terminal? Will it be first hello or last hello? Anybody? Last hello. And there you go, first hello. All right. So now let's say I open up a brand new editor, something like Visual Code. You see something here? You see these H's? They're called homoglyphs. It looks like an H, but it's not. When you start to look at something like UTF-8 and not just ASCII, like the good old days of ASCII, it's a different function. And what's scary about this is that if you ran a linter or some kind of tool like a SAS scanner, they'll say that's okay because it's a different function. It has no include. Now you may say, well, this is just a simple function, who cares? Imagine if I change say hello, and all of a sudden it says authenticate. Authenticate has an H in it, and my authenticate will call this one, and it will actually authenticate me, even though I might be an adversary, those kinds of things. So that's scary. One other thing that's scary about this, the Trojan source can even, you can input or integrate types of different characters that even comments could be used to execute code. Comments were safe in the old days. All your parsers, all your scanners, they would ignore them. I can write and integrate, like the supply chain attack, my own code into the comments. Because remember, this is kind of like a Turing machine, it's a state machine. So if it's reading in, you can trick it as flux. Defenses. So not all is bad. This is often how I feel. We interviewed a guy named Jeff Williams. I mentioned on the podcast for a while and he's presenting this to NIST. I like this idea. What we can do is label software like food. We can enumerate it. I know nobody knows really what they get. They know what the features are, but what's the risk associated with it? So as we see is transparency, risk enumeration. For food now, we may say sugar means more risk, or something like, if you notice here, it's probably hard to see, iron, 45%. Iron's a good thing, right? But for some people, there's side effects. Constipation is one, right? So it's nice in the sense that you know what you have this enumeration, you have maybe a high level risk, but at least people are aware of that. So this is working right now in NIST, where we can, at least from a security perspective, do some labeling. So my final slide is what you can do in 2022. And they're all rhyming, I like the titles I do. The first thing is, if you're working at a place and there's no security policy, and I've worked at places like that, you're doomed. So you have to start with the top-down policy with C-suite, with your C-suite, your executives. For the PMs and people that are planning, I know this sounds kind of strange, but the first thing you should do is plan for failure. You see those CVEs, those are zero-day vulnerabilities. You don't know what's coming. Plan for that. That's what we're saying. 3, build threat models, which I don't usually see people do. A threat model is where you're looking at your assets, who your adversaries are, and what they want. Build that, or you're not going to be able to figure anything out. It's reconnaissance, really. Secure coding goes to the developers, some of the stuff that I just showed. Fuzzing on the test team. So I was looking at some of the past presentation, and I noticed a lot of people, there was a couple of fuzzing ones. Do that. I'd love to talk about fuzzing all the time. And then finally, you may or may not have a security team, but to prove that all this other stuff is working, look at doing hackathons and red teaming, pen testing to find out what you did wrong. And it's okay. And it's safe. So that's it. I'm done. Hopefully I made it.
Thanks, John.